Hi there, I'm Leolia Lewis, and welcome to another edition of New Day, New Beginnings. Now, today's story is going to involve losers, users, anger, hate, and deception. But we're also going to see how to prevent ourselves from getting caught up in similar situations, in our own situations. Because our lesson title for today is Look Before You Leap. Why? Because you just may be jumping into sinking sand. Now, a lot of times we leap or jump into things without even thinking about it. We act on impulse. But then shortly thereafter, we're asking ourselves, what was I thinking? Or were we thinking at all? But in today's story, these three men, they needed each other just to make their plan successful. So they knew they were wrong, but they also felt that as well, we're not hurting anybody physically, that is, and it's okay. It's okay as long as they didn't get caught. Now, and yes, it it's a western. I hope you guys like westerns. I hope you're enjoying the story, but relate to it for yourself. That's the whole point. Relating the story to what would I do in my situation. Now, this all takes place out on the ranch with Lucas and Mark. Yeah, I saw it on the Rifleman a while back, and I was like, I like that plot, but it's a good story behind it. So anyway, Mark and Lucas, they're home and they're doing their chores around the farm and they're outdoors. And these three strangers ride up, and one man he introduces himself. He says, "I'm Benjamin Stark, and I'm looking for Lucas McCain. Are you Lucas McCain?" And he says, "Yeah." And this is my son, Mark. But he says, "I know." So Mark looks at his father and Lucas looks at him, and they're trying to figure out, well, how does he already know who we are, who you are? You're my son. How does he know that? So Stark says, now, I have business in town this afternoon at the North Fork Bank. And that transaction will be conducted more smoothly and certainly more profitably with someone like you to vouch for me. So Lucas is, well, Mr. Stark, since we've never met before, I need to know a little bit more about you before I can, as you say, vouch for you. Now, at this time, Lucas is suspicious already, of course, and he's kind of inching his hand over toward the rifle. And Stark shoots a warning shot in the air, and one of the other men get down and go and get the rifle. So now Mr. Stark is back on his conversation. So now, Mr. McCain, if you can introduce me to the bank manager, then we can finish our work efficiently and quietly, and no one will get hurt except that kid. And he looks over there at Mark. And the second guy that got the rifle, his name was Cougar. And he says, and if you want me to tell you what'll happen to that kid if you don't cooperate, so Stark cuts him off. Now, that's enough. That's enough. And he says to McCain, you know, he puts it rather crudely, but Mr. McCain, let me say that my brother, and he points to the other guy over there still standing. He says, my brother there, Noli, he'll be keeping your son company right here while we go into town. So we better get started, Mr. McCain. So now Lucas is going to get the wagon, and as he's getting up in the wagon, he's getting really mad, especially about them holding Mark. So he says, and if anything happens to my son, I will hunt you down and make it the sorriest day of your life. And Stark just looks at him and he says, oh, I give you my word, if all goes well in town, your boy won't be hurt in any way. So they go off to the bank. Now, at the ranch, Mark is there doing his chores, and Noli, he's what I call a gentle giant. He's big, not too smart. He's a little slow with his thought and things like that. And he's just really watching Mark till they come back. So he starts talking to Mark and trying to make him feel comfortable and know that, I'm not going to hurt you. So he's just an easygoing guy. And he does whatever his brother, who is Stark, the man that's doing all the talking, he does whatever he tells him to do. So now he's just assuring Mark, I won't let anything happen to you. So he said, we've done this before, and we never hurt anybody. And Mark's like, you did it before? And he's like, oh yeah, we did it many a times, plenty of times. I mean, once they come back from the town and taking care of the business, we just ride off. So he doesn't know what they're doing in town. All he knows is his job, his role is to just watch over the hostage, so to speak. But he doesn't even see it that way. And he's the Ben, that's Stark's first name. He says, he's telling them how Ben took care of him ever since they were kids, and how he would send him money when Ben was away at these schools out east, and he would send him money back, and that's how he got a ranch. And Ben bought him the ranch, and so he's going on and telling him how great Ben is, and how Ben had taken care of him since their parents had died. So while they're doing the chores and back in town, now we see Lucas in the bank, him, Stark, Benjamin Stark, and Cougar. So now Lucas is introducing him to the bank manager. This is Ben Stark. And he shakes his hand and all that. Now, the whole point is Stark is trying to act like he wants to get a loan, and he has money, and he wants to get a loan to do so and so forth. So he's having this lengthy conversation like he wants to transact business. And meanwhile, back at the farm, Noli's telling Mark like his whole life story, so to speak, because he said, yeah, I used to have a farm and a wife and a son. And Mark was like, you were married before? And he's like, yeah. He said, well, what happened to them? And he said, oh, one night she just got up and took him and went off. I guess I'm just one of them kind that can't hold on to anything. And he's slow in thinking, but he's kind and he's gentle. And he did have a son, and he knows what it's like to have anything happen to a child. He would never hurt a child. And he's telling him how she left, and he just never saw him again. And Mark was feeling bad for him, and he was like, oh, I'm sorry. And Noli said, well, that's all right. He said, I've no one to blame but myself. That's why I appreciate Ben so much, because he's the only real thing that I've got. I mean, he knows I'm not smart and everything, but he likes me anyway. So they were pitching, Noli was pitching the hay with the pitchfork, and Mark was up in the wagon putting the hay up there. And so Noli turned to do another pit, get some more hay with the pitchfork. And when he turned back around to throw it up there, Mark threw a bale of hay at him, which made him, Noli, fall down. And as Mark saw him fall, he jumped out the wagon and tried to run away. So in running away, Noli ran after him. So Mark was running so fast, he tripped. He tripped over a log, in fact, and he fell and hit his head on a rock. And as Noli came up and caught up to him, he saw him laying there. He said, boy, wake up, boy, wake up. And he was unconscious because he had really hit his head very hard, because there was blood on his head and on the rock. He was totally unconscious. So Noli got scared and he didn't know what to do. So he picked him up and carried him back home and took him in and laid him on his bed. Now, while all this is going on in town, at the bank, Stark's going through all this talk about this loan thing. So the clerk had come in for the manager to sign some papers or something. And the clerk went to close the vault door. And that's when Stark said, leave it open, leave it open. And he pointed his gun at the clerk. So the clerk had to back away, but the vault was now open. So the manager, he looks and he jumps up out his chair, and Lucas says, no, do as he says, do as he says. And the manager's like, well, Lucas, what is this all about? What's going on? And Lucas said, he's holding Mark hostage. So that's when the bank manager just kind of stopped dead in his tracks. So now Stark sees, now he gets the message. So he says, so now, Mr. Hamilton, the bank manager, put all that money in this, and he hands him a big satchel. He says, put all that money in this. So he empties the money out the vault into the bag and gives him the bag. Now, while all that's going on back at the ranch, Noli's having a fit because Mark is not responding. He's still unconscious. And he's like, wake up, boy, wake up. Do you hear me? You wake up. You shouldn't have run. You shouldn't have run. And he don't know what to do. So as all this is taking place in the bank, they've got the money. They're getting ready to leave the bank with the money. So Stark just tells them now, I want you gentlemen to just stay here for an hour quietly. And I promise you, I'll release your boy. And Lucas just said, if I find that my son has been hurt in any way, and Stark just cut him off. He said, look, you've been more than cooperative, Mr. McCain, and I promise to return that cooperation. Now, 1 hour, and don't try to cut any corners at this point. In other words, you've come this far, don't mess it up. So just sit tight for 1 hour. And he looked at the clock and it was 3:30 and the bank was closed. So nobody thought anything of it. Right. So an hour goes by. They go to the ranch to get Noli. But when they go to the ranch to get Noli, he's all upset and he comes running out. And he tells them the story how Mark, the boy, he tried to run away. And then he fell and he hit his head on that rock. And he's telling them the whole story. So Noli's worried about Mark. So he says, maybe I should stay here and you get a doctor and then I could tell them what happened. And his brother Stark, he says, look, what if he dies? Who's going to believe you then? Well, come on, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. So he convinces Noli, just leave him. They'll find him. He knew they would be coming in an hour. So he didn't care really. Neither did the other guy, Cougar. But anyhow, so they talked him into leaving. So the three of them left. And an hour later, of course, Lucas jumped on his horse and he went flying home. And he's calling out for Mark and he's saying, Mark, Mark. And he's looking around outside and he doesn't see him outside anywhere. So when he goes in, he finds him on his bed, unconscious. And he goes over and he's like, Mark, Mark. And then he sees the blood and he gets it, it's on his hand and so forth and so on. So now he goes for the doctor and gets him right back. And then the doctor comes and you see, it shows him bandaging Mark's head and he's telling him he'll be okay in time. He'll be okay. His mind might be a little foggy, but there was no fracture. So he didn't get hurt severely, but he just said with proper rest and care, he'll be fine. So at this point, Lucas is like fuming. So the doctor thinks, he says, oh, you're going to go catch up with the posse? Because he saw Lucas loading up his rifle, getting ammunition, getting all his stuff together. So the doctor said, well, the posse is they're going this direction or whatever. You can catch up with them. And then he's saying, well, no, I can travel faster by myself. And his whole facial expression had changed because now he's in a whole different mindset. A whole different mindset. So he says, what, you're not going to kill him, are you? And Lucas said, no, but they'll wish I had. Because before I'm through with them, they'll be begging me to kill them. But out on the trail, these three guys that had already been gone an hour or so, they rode hard and far. So they stopped to take a rest. So, but Stark, he's thinking, and he even said it to them. He said, I feel a lot better if I knew if that kid was alive or dead. But Cougar, he's the hard guy. What difference does it make? He says. But Noli, he says, what do you mean? What difference does it make? That was a fine boy. You wouldn't want him to die, would you, Cougar? And Cougar just looks at him and he says, your trouble is, you talk too much. And Noli's saying, well, your trouble is you never had a son of your own. And Cougar's like, oh, why don't you just shut up? I'm so sick and tired of you talking about that stupid kid of yours. And he said, you ought not talk about the boy like that. He's not stupid. And Cougar says, well, with you and his old man, he couldn't be anything else. And he starts laughing. So he's always dogging him because Noli is always remembering his own son because Mark reminded him of that. So when Noli said, with you and his old man, he couldn't be anything else but. And then Stark walked over to Cougar and says to him, he says, what did I tell you about staying off of Noli's back about that? And Cougar just looked at him and he said, oh, I got enough on my mind without having to hear about his kid and his farm and the wife he wasn't man enough to keep. So Stark says, well, when we get to Mexico, you won't have to listen to him anymore. We'll go our separate ways. And then Noli says, yeah, and you'll be nothing without Ben. You'll be nothing. We're going to make it, aren't we, Ben? And so Ben Stark says, Yeah, we're going to make it. Nobody's going to catch us at the pace we set because they were riding hard. So, and then he just went to turn up his canteen, Stark, to get a drink of water. And all of a sudden, a shot rang out and his whole canteen flew right out of his hand. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, it was Lucas. It was Lucas. He rode hard too, but he rode out of anger. He rode hard out of anger and hate. So they ducked behind the rocks for cover, but the next three shots scared off their horses. And then they tried to reach for their canteens that had fallen on the ground, and he shot holes in all the canteens, all three of their canteens. So now they don't have a horse, no horses, and no water. So Stark says to the guys, he says, all right, he's got us now. We don't have any horses. All right, McCain, what's our next move? So Lucas hollers out to them. He says, start walking back to North Fork. And Cougar's like, walk back? That's 50 miles or so in this wasteland. Is she crazy? So Stark says to him, he says, oh, he wants us to shoot while he's out of range. That way they won't have no more bullets. But we'll just have to get closer to him. So the only thing Cougar's thinking about, yeah, and I want the first shot. So Lucas hollers down, all right, get moving, get moving. So Lucas is up at a higher level. So he's higher up above them. So he can look down and actually see their every move, whereas they can't see him because he's up too high. And they're out of range, but his rifle is not. So now they walking and they're walking and they're walking. And now it's the heat of the day and they're getting hot and they're thirsty and they're tired and they want to stop and take a rest, and they can't because, well, he just, every time they go to stop to do something, he makes them keep walking. So finally, Cougar wants to make a deal. So he calls out to McCain, okay, McCain, we'll give you half of the money if you just let us go. And when he said, let us go, of course, he shot another warning shot to him. And then a few minutes later, Cougar says, well, all right, you can have all the money. You can have it all. Just let us go. Let us go. And Lucas shot again. So now Cougar's like, he's going to try to throw Noli under the bus by saying, it wasn't us. It was him that hurt the kid. We'll send him up to you. If you let us go, we'll send him up to you. And Noli, he's like, well, tell him it was an accident. But he's not saying that. He's just saying, we didn't do nothing. We didn't do nothing to him. So Stark is now mad at Cougar for trying to throw his brother under the bus. He says, you don't have no right to offer up Noli to save your own skin. But Cougar's saying, yeah, but he wants blood for blood. That means Noli. I didn't touch that kid. And so Noli's looking at his brother. He's like, Glenn, please. McCain will kill me. I know he will. So his brother Stark says, okay, I'll go along with it. But first, let me try out one thing, and maybe we won't even have to give up Noli. So he bends down and he's trying to make a diagram in the dirt about if we go around this way, and he's going on with this diagram. But what he's doing is picking up a handful of dirt, and he stands up and throws it in Noli's face. I mean, not Noli's face, in Cougar's face, because that way he can get the jump on Cougar. So when he throws the dirt in Cougar's face, he draws his own gun, shoots Cougar as he was trying to shoot Noli. So Cougar ended up dead because Stark shot him, but Newly did get injured severely on his side. But so then, now that his brother is wounded and Cougar's dead anyway, now Stark is saying, okay, McCain, okay, we give up. We'll go along peacefully. So they began to walk down towards Northport, but they did come to a watering hole. And this is where things take a change because Newly was severely hurt. And McCain saw that. So he got on his horse and rode down to where they were at the watering hole. And Stark was like looking at his brother and he's like, forgive me, Newly. You shouldn't have to die like this. And as Lucas came up, he said, well, he's here, McCain. He's dying like an animal. You got what you wanted. My brother is dying. But after Lucas looked at him and heard what Cougar had said, that nobody was with the boy but him, he knew that Newly had to be the one to bring him home. So when he saw him lying there, he put down his rifle and he said, I came to help. So he helped him. They got him up and got him going because when he started his venture, his anger and hate had sent him on this mission. That's what got him on their trail. But after he saw what his son Holman, not I say left out to die, he was grateful. And now his hate and anger was replaced with compassion and grateful that his son had been returned home. So, because of Cougar trying to sell him out, he made Lucas know that Newly saved his son. So, that's how that went. And then they went and got Newly a doctor. And Mark did come around and he did tell his father the whole story. But the point here is Mark reminded his father of a lesson that he had taught him earlier on in his young life. And he said, remember, Pop, you told me if I make a bad mistake, I shouldn't go on grieving about it. I should admit it to myself that I was wrong and use it as a lesson to not make the same mistake again. Now, Lucas's mistake was going after a man with anger and hate in his heart when he started, because he thought he was the man that had harmed his son, but in reality, he had taken him to a safe place. And so many times in our everyday lives, we make errors in judgment calls, especially when we don't know the whole story or we don't have all the facts. And sometimes we deceive ourselves by even what we see. And that's what Lucas did, because when he saw the blood on Mark's head, that's when he became a different person. That's when he began to look for payback and revenge. But luckily, he got the facts before he made a grave mistake, because he probably would have killed all three of them. And that's very out of character for him. But this is just one example of how we have to learn to look before we leave. Don't be so anxious to pounce on somebody just because of hearsay or various explanations, or even sometimes lies and fabrication. Get the facts, get the true facts, all of them. And how do you do these things? But above all things, what you have to do is ask God for guidance, direction, and discernment, the wisdom to see beyond the surface. Take your time, because once you make that mistake, there might not be any taking it back. And like that old saying goes, what to say, better safe than sorry. And that's true. Look before you leap. And my closing words for today are those who leave everything in God's hands will eventually see God's hands in everything. And until next week, I'm Lelia Lewis. Thanks for joining me.